Okay, so like I said, check your grades, be proactive, guys. Everything except the test is in of now. On Friday, you'll be updated completely with all of your stuff.
So vocab tomorrow?
Yes. So make sure that you get your vocab in. You're going to do 2 little assignments today. Make sure you do these. You'll have time to do them in class. But we're going to start with the Renaissance, and we're going to specifically look at the Renaissance in Italy. But the question that we first have to answer is, what is the Renaissance?
I went to that medieval times.
Oh, nice. I don't know what you're talking about, so I cannot answer that question.
There's like a medieval time, like, thing where people like fight and eat chicken.
Oh, I don't think so. All right. So we're looking at this time period in terms of mainly culture, education, politics. This is kind of the first time period we're going to start seeing historians go, well, maybe the Greeks were right. Maybe the Greeks had kind of a handle on a lot of this. And with that, we're going to see a lot of things come to be. And we're also going to look at, and I want you to be thinking about this question, all right, because it is your discussion question later, but think about it for right now. Why do you think that the Renaissance began in Italy? I want you to be actively thinking about this as we go through here. So this time period starts looking at history without the religious undertones. So it's more of the idea of humans, and we're going to get to that. But this marks a period where we see a switch from agriculture to urban society. Does anyone want to take a guess as to what that could mean? What is a switch from an agriculture to an urban society? Any ideas?
Farming.
So agriculture is farming, right? So if we're switching from farming, what do you think the main aspects of this culture are going to be? If it's not farming, technology maybe. I'm thinking trade. We see trade. We're going to see technological advances, things like that. So this time period results in trade becoming more important. We're going to see less people farming, which means we're going to see more consumers. So there's less of those creating food, cultivation, things like that, and more people buying and spending money, right? We're also going to see a thing called patronage start to become really popular. Anybody ever heard of the website Patreon? Okay? People like YouTubers, podcasters, TikTok people, every like social media people use this website called Patreon.
Olivia Forms isn't loading, so give me.
Olivia Forms isn't loading, so we're going to have a hold on this one.
Take attendance for first period.
Yes. Okay, so that's where we start seeing a lot of regular social media people. They use this website where you can pay for their content, okay? I know a group of podcasters that I follow have a Patreon that you pay. You get an extra episode of their podcast, things like that, video access to things. This is something that's popular during the Renaissance. It's a little bit different, but this supports a lot of historical arts, okay? So what artists like musicians, painters, sculptors, these people are going to be supported but with patronage. Who do you think would support these people? Who do you think would be the main groups that support? Think about Renaissance art, okay? Merchants, very good. Renaissance art like this painting of the Sistine Chapel, the Last Supper, the sculpture of St. George, the sculpture of John, things like that. Nope, but good guess. There's a lot of famous Johns. Who do you think would support these kind of art projects? The church, right? And we're going to see a lot of influence from the church. So we're going to see patronage start. We're going to see people start using technology and thinking to comprehend the world they live in more. And with the video, we're going to see a couple aspects specifically in reference to wealth. So this is where we're going to go with these video questions. I want you guys to watch the video. You can complete these questions during or after the video. This is not due until tomorrow night, but I'd like you to get it done as soon as possible just because while it's fresh in your head. We're also going to cover this a little bit more in depth after the video. We're just going to recover it for you. So The first question is I want you to think about how wealth is used during Renaissance Italy. I want you to give me 2 examples, either for social, economic, political gain, for both, whatever. We're going to cover that. The other thing I want you to do is think about examples of the Renaissance that you experience outside of education, okay? I'm going to give you a couple examples. This is mainly from TVs and movies, but there's a lot of architecture, art, music. Here are my examples, okay? Who are those green guys? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Can anyone tell me their names?
Donnie, Leo, Leonardo, and Raphael.
This one that you missed.
Donatello.
Yeah. So we have Donatello, Raphael, Leonardo, and Michelangelo, right? Okay. Guess what? Those are the big 4 artists that we're going to be looking at when we talk about Renaissance art. Those guys are very, very, very popular during the Renaissance and still today. We see them in pop culture. Okay. The other 2 pictures are both of our Leonardo da Vinci. The one is from a video game where he's holding like a weird paper thing. That's from the video game Assassin's Creed. He's used as a character. That video game takes place during the Renaissance. The other picture is again of Leonardo da Vinci. And anyone want to guess who that woman is sitting on the bench? That is the Mona Lisa. The woman who... It is from Mr. Peabody and Sherman. So there's another example of an experience of Leonardo da Vinci outside of education. We see them in pop culture. This is what I want you to be thinking about. Okay? So we're going to watch this video. I want you again to be thinking about these 2 questions, how wealth is used and experiences from your life outside of education from individuals in the Renaissance or from Renaissance aspects. So with that, I will get started with the video here. Olivia, Forms isn't working, so you have to take that tomorrow.
Where is these?
Okay.
In history. So as you'll recall from our previous episode, a declining European population due to disease and war in the 14th century meant that labor had become much more valuable, which shifted long-held beliefs about how society should be organized. Amid all this upheaval, and to some extent because of it, the Florentine author Francesco Petrarca, aka Petrarch, was unleashing his critique of 14th century life. Living, he lamented, "I despise what melancholy fate has brought us wretches in these evil years." So, Petrarch, are you sure you weren't writing about now? It's almost like people always feel like they live in the worst possible time. At any rate, unhappy with the state of things in his Europe, Petrarch turned to Plato and Cicero and other ancient writers whom he thought of as residents of the Old Age. In fact, Petrarch gave the era in which he lived its name, calling them the Middle Ages, just as his writing and research helped usher in a new age that we now call the Renaissance. According to Renaissance author Leonardo Bruni in the early 15th century, Francesco Petrarch was the first with a talent sufficient to recognize and call back to light the ancient elegance of the lost and extinguished style. The Renaissance, meaning revival or renewal, harkened back to what was seen as the bright light of classical antiquity, which had then been obscured in the dark and ignorant Middle Ages. But in some ways, the Middle Ages existed simultaneously with the Renaissance. Like, just as scholars were reviving translations of Plato and integrating knowledge from the Islamic world, the bubonic plague went on killing people. And in Petrarch's hometown, ordinary people like the Ciompi were vigorously protesting living conditions. Which brings us to an old question here at Crash Course. Was the Renaissance really a thing? Was it in fact just a continuation of the medieval world, or was it the dramatic change that Renaissance thinkers believed it to be? The writers and thinkers of the Renaissance scoured monasteries for ancient works, initially written or at least influenced by Roman writers. It was from this manuscript hunting, especially for works by Cicero and Tacitus and Quintilian, that Renaissance scholars began to focus on so-called humanism. That is to say, they became more interested in worldly and human concerns. And because the Renaissance really was a revival, this new thought was based on learning about old or ancient ways, especially in the study of the humanities. The three liberal arts of grammar, rhetoric, and logic led to the so-called sciences of theology, philosophy, laws, and medicine. The study of the humanities as developed by the ancients focused not on the heavens or saints, but on human speech or rhetoric, human logic, and the correct use of language. And by language, of course, they mostly meant Latin. Being able to write in Latin and even perform Latin orations was seen as key to a fully educated life, as every high school Latin teacher will be happy to tell you. Competence in these fields was seen as crucial to developing the self and a prerequisite for joining Florentine or Venetian elites. Like Venetian youth Lauro Quirini, for instance, studied the humanities at the University of Padua and then was sent to work in a Venetian enterprise on Crete, fully prepared for his new job as a commodities trader, although he also worked as a translator and a writer. You might say that he was a real Renaissance man. I'm sorry. The Italian city-states were the heartland of the early Renaissance. In these prosperous cities, artists, composers, writers, and scholars thrived alongside the commerce that paid for everything. Urban merchants and manufacturers built a brisk business that brought in products and ideas from around Afro-Eurasia, and some families achieved immense wealth, which allowed them to support the world of Renaissance thinkers and artists in a system called patronage. I would like a phenomenally wealthy patron like Lorenzo Medici. If any of you are out there, I am available. And I would like all of your ducats. You can visit patreon.com/crashcourse. But at any rate, banking institutions also sprang up, and bankers funded civic events and the construction of lavish cathedrals. Bankers also backed or personally paid for the building of masterworks in the classical style, that is, in the style of the restrained, stately design of the pre-Christian Roman Empire. Did the globe open? Is there a neoclassical piggy bank in the center of the world? There is. You know all the white statues of the Renaissance that take their whiteness from the white statues of the ancient Greeks and Romans? Yeah, they were not white. They were painted. Here are some of our best guesses of what actual classical statues looked like. And as you can see, not very much like neoclassical white piggy banks. Nonetheless, the idea of unpainted marble or porcelain or whatever has proven so powerful that even though we now know that ancient statues